So what a good morning it is to gather here at the home of my wonderful union, the mighty AMNF. And it is wonderful to see so many loyal Labor supporters here today, including our great nurses and midwives, my wonderful Labor colleagues who are all here, and our very important Labor candidates who will soon join us in Canberra, I'm absolutely sure. Now, we all know that there are a million reasons for booting the Morrison government out. This morning, we will hear yet more. But first, I'd like to acknowledge the country on which we gather. We are on Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nations, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Just yesterday, I was speaking with the elders of the Cooper family, custodians of the history and culture of William Cooper, after whom my electorate is named. And Uncle Kevin Russell said a beautiful thing to me. First of all, he told me a story about the word Wurundjeri. I have been saying it incorrectly for years, and a young boy in Thornbury Primary who learns the Woi Wurrung language, which we are very proud of, said, "Jed, you're saying it wrong. It's Wurundjeri." But he told me that Wurrun means manna gum, and Jerry means grub. So Wurundjeri actually means manna gum grub, which of course was an incredibly important staple food for the people. It gave them shelter, it gave them fuel, the manna gum that is, and they built important utensils from that important tree. And after telling me that story, Uncle Kevin said that in acknowledging country, we tell a story of a culture thousands of years old. And in telling that story, we keep that culture, and importantly, we keep country alive. So that's our story today, and that's why it's incredibly important to acknowledge country. But now we are here today because we know that there are good and important things to fight for and to make happen. And we know that Labor makes things happen. And I know I'm in good company to say that nurses are the beating heart of our health system. They've been on the front line over the past 2 years as COVID has torn through our community. And Labor is the party that protects Australia's health system and Medicare. So I could go on about that forever, but I'm going to hand over now to one of our brilliant nurses, Jilska Williams, who has a few words to say. Jilska, I'd like to welcome you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jilska Williams, and I'm a neonatal nurse. I have worked both in Australia and in the UK for the past 48 years. For nurses and midwives, the last 3 years have been extraordinary. For example, even yesterday, I had to FaceTime my poor mother who was unable to come in because she had COVID. This is something I had never done before, but it's necessary. Starting in 2019, when catastrophic bushfires erupted across the country, destroying wildlife, property and people's lives, including nurses and midwives. And now in 2022, devastation for many communities continues with unprecedented floods across New South Wales and Queensland. All this happened while the COVID-19 pandemic, the greatest health emergency the world has ever seen in more than 100 years, took hold across the globe. In response, nurses and midwives were called to action like never before to care for the victims of these emergencies and to protect the community at large. When the COVID pandemic first hit Australia, the response was good, and Australia was seen as a world leader in managing the virus and healthcare workers, especially nurses who were seen as superheroes. But the pandemic had actually just begun. Now, more than 2 years later, the havoc caused by COVID's second wave in Victoria in private aged care in 2020 COVID's Delta variant in 2021 in New South Wales and Victoria, and then waves of the Omicron variant spreading through the entire country has taken its toll. Throughout this time, nurses, midwives and care workers have been at the heart of Australia's response to COVID-19 on virtually every front, and been witness to the impact of these events on our communities. But most significantly for us, the ongoing impact on nurses, midwives and care workers who have had no respite. The pressure we feel is not just the pressure of caring directly for COVID patients and the ongoing COVID pressure, but also the pressure of caring for people with other emergencies and health conditions, many of which have been delayed and have worsened over the last 2 years. Nurses, midwives and carers are exhausted. For more than 2 years, we have dealt with unrelenting workloads with scared and very often very sick patients in hospitals with and without COVID, who relied on us totally when their relatives couldn't be with them. This has been even more difficult while wearing full PPE, which takes extra time but also makes communication and connection with patients more challenging. We have done all this while caring for our own families and dealing with COVID in our own communities. The burnout and exhaustion we feel is worse because many of the stresses we have endured are not only related to COVID, but are because of the problems that have already existed. We need the federal government to address the significant stress across the entire health system. In addition to the issues in aged care and primary care, we need increased funding for public hospitals from the Commonwealth. My mother was in an aged care. She was 103 years old, and I saw nurses struggling to look after these patients. Even when my mother needed pain relief, we had to wait for a very long time because there was lack of nurses. We don't need just an increase in funding, but changes to our funding models. As well as better primary care services, we need funding models which recognize the contribution of nurses and midwives. We also need an aged care system that puts the needs of the elderly first. We also need a government which will build a well-resourced public health system that will not make the states and territories go to it alone. We need a federal government that won't turn its back on nurses, midwives, carers. Thank you.
Oh, well done, Jilska. That was fabulous. Thank you. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce a man who really needs no introduction. The Shadow Minister for National Reconstruction, Employment and Small Business, and the Shadow Minister for Science. A man whose portfolio has him pushing frontiers and pretty soon, I reckon, cutting ribbons. I give you the next Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, Richard Marles.
Well, how good is Jed Carney? And Jilska, can I just say how important it has been to hear your voice today, and we are so grateful that you have exercised with us today. Friends, it is an honour to speak with some of the people that all of us have come to rely on these past few years. Australians owe you, our healthcare heroes, so much. Your work has never been more important. Your contribution to our nation has never been so valuable. And it's time we had a federal government that recognises your value and rewards it. It's my job today to introduce you to Albo. The election is now on. And you might have noticed on Saturday, the day before he finally called the election, Scott Morrison posted a video on social media. In the video, he talks a lot, mainly about himself. He talks about the pandemic and how apparently he saved 40,000 lives. That's right, Scott Morrison saved 40,000 lives. The bloke who couldn't set up proper quarantine centres, the bloke who didn't order enough vaccines, he's now telling us that he saved 40,000 lives. We know the Prime Minister is prone to stretching the truth, but really? We know the actual truth. You know the actual truth. He didn't save those lives, you did. And we will always be grateful. You were working to the point of collapse while he was making excuses for his mistakes. You were working with each other to protect people while he was blaming everybody else. You did your jobs and you did them brilliantly, while he said again and again, it's not my job. And after all your work and all your sacrifice, as soon as the election is on, Morrison is trying to steal the credit. And so I didn't want to come here today without reminding everyone where the credit really lies, because it lies with you and thousands of Australians like you. So on behalf of the nation, thank you. The campaign has started, the contest is underway, and the choice is clear. 3 more years of Morrison or a better future with Australian Labor. A better future where we train more nurses. A better future where we put more nurses into aged care homes to give our most precious Australians the dignity they deserve. And a better future where we recognise those care workers with a decent pay rise. Friends, this election is critical because our health and aged care systems are under more strain than they have ever been. The truth is, at this election, we need to rescue healthcare from Scott Morrison and the Liberals. And that starts with prizing Morrison's hands off Medicare. Because before every election, the Liberals say they won't touch Medicare. And then after every election, the Liberals cut Medicare. They are doing it again. They are cutting it every day. Cut after cut. And it's the sneakiness, the way they cut by stealth, that should concern Australians the most. You see, they don't destroy Medicare overnight. They are too tricky for that. A cut here, a cut there. It's hard to notice day to day or week to week, but over time, that's what Morrison is doing to Medicare. 900 cuts and changes to rebates, freezing it over 6 years. And Australians cannot risk waking up in 3 years' time to a Medicare system that is totally destroyed and beyond saving because Scott Morrison was given 3 more years to cut it down. We can't afford to let that happen to Medicare, which means we can't afford 3 more years of Scott Morrison. Now, there's another person running in this election, Anthony Albanese. This is a man who talked about Medicare in his very first speech to Parliament 25 years ago. This is a bloke whose very first campaign on behalf of his local community was to save the Marrickville Medicare office from closing. He's fought to protect Medicare since day one, and now he wants to strengthen Medicare for all of us as our next Prime Minister, because access to timely, quality and affordable healthcare relies on strong Medicare, and Anthony knows that. And not from some briefing note, not from a poll or a focus group. He learnt it from his mum, who raised him on her own while dealing with her own debilitating illness and getting by on the disability pension. See, some just see Medicare as a line item on a budget spreadsheet, But Anthony knows that behind every cut to Medicare is a person who is hurting. He knows that because he saw what happened when he was young and health funding was cut. He saw that the quality of care his mum received was cut as well. Behind every one of Morrison's cuts to Medicare is a person who is hurting. Someone who is a little sicker or a little poorer than they otherwise have to be. And too often that's exactly the choice many Australians have to face when they get sick now. Do I want to be out of pocket or do I want to be out of care? Well, it's time to put an end to that terrible, tragic choice. So let's instead make it this election a different choice. Australians will choose who they wake up with on the 22nd of May. Morrison or Medicare. That is the choice. Morrison or Medicare. And there's only one person who can stop Morrison and protect Medicare. So please welcome him, ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Albanese.
I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and I pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and I recommit on behalf of the Australian Labor Party to the Uluru Statement from the Heart in full. I welcome all of my parliamentary team and future parliamentary team here this morning from the great state of Victoria. And I particularly welcome the heroes of the pandemic, our nurses and midwives. Some of them needing a bit of health care clearly themselves. I'm sure you are well looked after. Friends, the morning after the 21st of May can be the moment we begin a better future for Australia with a Labor government. At the heart of building that better future will be repairing and strengthening our health system. Not just restoring it to how it was before the pandemic. Health workers and patients alike know that it was under serious strain already. Our aim is to build it back better, with stronger Medicare as its backbone. We need to get it right for ourselves as a society, because taking care of each other is at the heart of how we see ourselves as a people and a nation. And we need to get it right for the proper functioning of the economy. Now, no economy can come close to realising its potential without a healthcare system worthy of the name. Stronger healthcare is a precondition for a stronger economy. Surely the pandemic, if we needed any reminder, has reminded us of that. And a proper healthcare system cannot be everything it can be until the hard-working health workers of this country have a proper partner in government. A government that has your back just as you have the back of every single Australian in your care. Yeah. Now, I look at you all here with me today, and what I see are the faces of what has been the front line for the longest 2 years of Australians' lives. I see heroes of the pandemic. I see the nurses and midwives who are the heart and soul of the system, the mainstay of a patient's treatment and indeed their recovery. You are the first reassuring face that many see when they become ill. Tragically, amid the isolation of the pandemic, you have also been the final source of comfort. I see the heart of the aged care sector, the very people who give their all to ensure older Australians have the care, comfort and dignity that they so richly deserve, as the people who built this country. Together, you're like the roof of our society, our ultimate shelter and protection. But I also see and hear directly from you about exhaustion. I see healthcare workers close to running on empty, let down by a complacent government that has made the mistake of taking our healthcare system for granted. A government that assumed that a system so carefully built up by past Labor governments and by legions of health workers could simply be left to coast along without nurture and without care. A government where the health minister quits without a successor in the middle of a pandemic, where the aged care minister comes up with excuses to justify avoiding scrutiny over his role in presiding over a crisis in aged care, and where the Prime Minister never bothers to live up to his job title. A Prime Minister who never takes responsibility and only ever looks to blame others. They have no plan for the future. They struggle with the present and they refuse to learn from the past. What a lost opportunity that is. Because if nothing else, the pandemic has given us some tough but vital lessons, and we must learn from every single one of them. I often think of something that an aged care worker said to me in the early days of the pandemic. Sitting in my office, they came and they said that COVID was like an X-ray because it showed us what was broken. I think that applies right across our health system. That X-ray has shown us the fractures, the stresses, the pressure points, the parts most at risk. So many of you have been warning us for years, even before COVID reached us, about the pressure on that system. And friends, today my message to you is very clear and very simple. Labor is listening and Labor will act. Now, right now is exactly the moment we should be working to build a better, stronger, more durable health system for everyone. That is part of the better future that is within our reach. It is the future a Labor government will make possible. And when you look to our record of achievement, it's clear that so much more is possible when Labor is in power. It's a proud record that we have, and crucially, it's a lasting record. Whenever Australia has got it right with health policy, it's because the Labor government has done it. Now, over the coming days, you'll be hearing more about Labor's plans to protect and strengthen Medicare. On Monday in Tasmania, I announced Labor's plans to improve support for children with hearing loss. And yesterday, I announced that Labor will restore bulk billed telehealth, psychiatric consultations for rural and regional Australians. Now, the pandemic didn't just take a toll on people's physical health, it took a toll on their emotional and mental health as well. We all know that. And that is why Labor will reverse those cuts to telehealth consultations. And today I announce another of Labor's measures to strengthen Medicare. Labor will roll out 50 GP-led enhanced Medicare urgent care clinics around the country. Now, these Medicare urgent care clinics will be open longer hours, 7 days a week. They will be in every single state and territory. They'll provide a whole range of medical services that you never know until you need them. Treatments for sprains and broken bones, stitches, ear infections and minor burns. They will make it easier for Australians to see a doctor when they require it, even on weekends and in the evening. Importantly, the services will be bulk billed. Australians won't need their wallet, they'll just need their Medicare card. Now, with their own nursing staff, walk-in urgent care clinics will help to take the pressure off hospital emergency departments, which have been already feeling the added strain during the pandemic. We know that that is absolutely critical. And anyone who has had to go to one during the past couple of years has seen how crowded they become. I ended up in an emergency department myself last January. As waiting times blow out, hard-working nurses and other hospital staff end up working harder and harder. You give your all. You put your mental and physical well-being on the line for your fellow Australians, and you do it day in and day out. I say to you today, you are extraordinary and selfless Australians, but we have no right to ask you to carry the load alone. That is just another reason these urgent care clinics are so necessary. Just as they will make things easier for patients, they will take some of the pressure off nurses. Nurses and midwives are frontline workers in every sense of the word. Not only are you expert medical professionals, you provide so much emotional support. Who doesn't have a story of a stressful moment for themselves or their family in a hospital when you turn to a nurse for comfort, for reassurance, for advice, and sometimes just some straight talk? During the pandemic, nurses were often a patient's only company during their final hours on this earth. And you were the front line for family members too, often being the first port of call for the frustrations and the emotions of worried loved ones. The pressure has left many nurses completely burned out. And the tragic reality is that after 2 relentless years, nurses are leaving the profession. When we don't support our nurses, it has a ripple effect that is felt by every Australian, which is why today I announce that Labor will launch a new National Nurse and Midwife Health Service. Now, here in Victoria, we know that Victoria's been leading the way on this issue. Leading the way, and I give credit to Dan Andrews for doing that. But with this service in place nationally, access to personalised and professional support services for nurses and midwives will be just a phone call away. Whether you're concerned about stress levels, you feel exhausted or anxious, or are struggling with mental health, you'll be able to pick up the phone and get free, confidential and independent advice, information, treatment and specialist referrals. Urgent care clinics, a national nurse and midwife health service. My two announcements today are positive, practical changes, and that is what Australia needs, and that is what Labor does. Now, a couple of years ago, when I became Labor leader, I had the great honour of speaking to the national conference here of the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Federation, and it was a great honour for me. And at that time, I copped some pretty tough questions, particularly about aged care. I said to you, our nurses on the front line, that I would come back to you with a fully costed and appropriate response. And in that same spirit as today's announcements, I used my budget reply speech to announce our plan to fix the aged care system. Now, it's important to say that many facilities do a magnificent job. I was with Emma McBride on the central coast of New South Wales on the weekend, where the only complaint from residents was that they got too much food. But the truth is that's not the case everywhere, as the Royal Commission exposed. And I know that aged care workers show up every day and do their absolute best with what they have. They show love and respect for those in their care. So thank you for everything that you do every single day. But the truth is, the Royal Commission found that the system was at breaking point. And carers, of course, when you speak to them, they'll all tell you just that. And that is why Labor has a real, concrete, comprehensive plan to fix the crisis in aged care. A plan that is in line with the recommendations of the Royal Commission. We didn't make this up. There's a Royal Commission there with recommendations. We should implement them. A plan for 215 minutes of care for residents each day. A plan for better wages. A plan for wages for aged carers. A better wage. What we have at the moment is the government objecting to this. They're all up for the one-off payments, but the one-off payments end after people have cast their votes in May. We need to do better. We have a plan for better food and nutrition, and we've got the support there of no less than Maggie Beer and her foundation to give us advice there. We have a plan for improved transparency and accountability measures as well, to make sure that every dollar goes to better food, goes to better care, goes to help people who need that spent on them, not on just profits. But the first part of our plan, and not by accident, will be to make sure that every aged care facility in the country has a registered nurse on site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, I've been in Tassie for the last couple of days. It already happens there. It already happens. It's in place. It shows it can be done, and it should happen as a matter of course. So just as we're going to put the care back into aged care, we're going to put the nurses back into nursing homes. Because every Australian living in aged care should get the medical attention they need the moment they need it. Now, the first measure that I announced today was about taking pressure off emergency departments. If you have a nurse in every nursing home who can deal with an issue before it becomes acute, then you will take some of the pressure off EDs as well, which is one of the things that we need to do. Now, it shocks so many Australians to learn that we don't already have nurses in nursing homes, because it's just common sense and it is just common decency. Now, what underpins our entire system is Medicare, a proud Australian achievement. That its creation was one of the overriding priorities of the Hawke government tells you everything that you need to know about the Labor Party. It came after the Fraser government abolished Gough Whitlam's Medibank program. And of course we know that the Liberals went to elections promising to abolish Medicare as well. Our Conservative opponents know they can't anymore propose to abolish universal health care in total, so they've resorted to undermining it. It is only Labor that believes to our core in Medicare. It is only Labor that ever does the big things to change the country for the better, to imagine but then set about creating a better future. Medicare is powered by what must always be one of the most sacred principles that we have as Australians, that good health care has to be available to every single Australian, regardless of your postcode or the size of your bank balance. It isn't a lottery, it isn't the preserve of the lucky few. And it's so much more than a safety net, because what a safety net does is catch you when you fall. Good health care, with Medicare at its foundation, seeks to stop people falling in the first place. And that makes good economic sense as well. Medicare gives Australians a sense of security and that confidence that makes it possible to plan ahead and to achieve their aspirations. We're proud of Medicare, not just because it protects us, but because it has become part of our national identity. With its green and gold, it is the most patriotic piece of plastic you can have in your wallet. And the most enduring, because a Labor government will always protect it and will strengthen it. We make things to last, not like our opponents who fling money around like confetti, the one-off payments with all the sincerity and the staying power of a fake tan. That's what we saw in their budget. Their idea of vision is something that ends once the election is over. And then, as sure as night follows day, more cuts will come. More cuts to health, more cuts to education, more cuts to services that people rely on, because they've just discovered cost of living pressure, but they think it'll all end after May 21. Well, Labor will put in place long-term reforms, because it's what we do. We change the country for the better. Just as Medicare has outlasted Bob Hawke exactly as he intended, we want to make the changes and the reforms that will outlive us and improve the lives of younger generations and those to come. The same energy that drives us on Medicare drives us on every aspect of our plan to shape and build a better future for our country. Whether it's creating secure, well-paid jobs, making childcare cheaper, making energy prices cheaper by dealing with the challenge of climate change, or building Australia's future right here. Australia is the greatest country in the world, and Medicare is the best health system. But we can be a better country with a better government and a better health system. And we can do it together with healthcare workers like our nurses, carers and midwives who have given us the honour of joining us here today. You hold our nation together, and I promise you this, a Labor government will always have your back. Thanks very much.
Authorised by P. Erickson, ALP, Canberra.